Hello and welcome to the Move Me Brightly podcast. My name's Tom. I'm here with my co-host Blaine. Hi, Blaine.
Hello.
Together we have over 32 years of combined experience in the creative industry, and it hasn't been easy. We've had to put in long hours, climb the ranks, and do the jobs nobody wanted to do, all in hopes of one day living our dreams of living creative lives with creative careers. But you know what we discovered? Living the creative life you always wanted isn't all it's cracked up to be. Every day is full of inspiration, creative problem solving, and that can lead to burnout. This podcast explores the way in which top people in the creative industry move forward in a career they love while finding new ways to infuse creativity into their lives and work and keep that creative passion alive. Join us weekly as we have those conversations and walk away with nuggets we could all use to stave off burnout and continue to produce better and better work. And also just come hang out with us because it's going to be fun.
Tom, hey,
What?
how was your day?
Day was good. Got up early. I had a Zoom conference in the morning about financing for feature films and whatnot, gap financing, tax incentives, all the new state laws that have been around. Played a little bit of poker on my phone.
There we go.
And then I got some acai for my breakfast / lunch, an acai bowl.
Oh, acai bowl. Acai.
Acai. So good. I eat those a lot. I'm a big fan. And I used to just get an acai bowl with some fruit toppings and granola inside for like the crunch factor.
Sure. Yeah.
But I started doing this thing where I'm adding almond butter to it.
Protein. Game
Changer. Oh my God. And it works with any fruit. It doesn't matter what fruit you put on that acai. It kills it, like in a good way, like a good death, a happy death. Like
Are you having this delivered to you via Uber Eats?
Sometimes there's one like a mile and a half away. So if I'm feeling fancy and it's not 98 degrees like it is today, I'll go for a little stroll and eat it there, because if I walk to pick it up, it'll be melting by the time I get it. But today was a delivery. Yes, because as soon as I stepped outside to pick up the food, it was just like, cold outside. We're at 67, man. Sorry, Kat. I know you guys are freezing, but this is my climate. This is my home.
I also like 67. If it goes up to 70, I'm sweating.
I have a Nest air conditioning system.
Mm-hmm.
It's been doing this weird thing where it'll just automatically stop. Like it will no longer remain at the temperature I set it to. So I'll set it for like 68 or whatever. And then I'll go to bed and I'll wake up and the house is at 76.
No.
But it says the AC's been on all night.
No.
It's terrible.
Yeah, you need to call a technician or something.
An esthetician.
Yeah.
How was your day?
Day was good. I was out of town last week and I'm home and I am knocking out some chores. I had a man come assess some trees in my backyard today. If you follow me on social media, you saw that I had a snake in my attic last night. I got that removed.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, snake. Huge. And I saw it with my own eyes and it was big. And then we sent Oliver up you had to like climb the stairs to the attic to see it. And we were like, it didn't tell him what it was. We're like, Oliver, you got to see this. And he climbed up and then he looks and he goes, it's a freaking snake. So I got the snake removed. And then we were on our second day of football practice. It's burning up here. And that was my day.
What position is Oliver playing?
He told me he's thinking about being a tight end. And I said, and what do they do? And he told me. I don't understand the intricacies of football. Baseball's my sport.
That's very disappointing because, as everyone will hear in the interview, there's a little Georgia Bulldogs discussion. And you now, what I believe to be falsely, state that you're a big Bulldogs fan.
No. My not knowing the positions holds no bearing on my knowing what a sack is, knowing what a touchdown is, knowing what an extra point is.
Is the tight end on offense or defense?
Offense?
That's correct.
I don't know.
That's correct. I was trying to take you out. I really wanted you to get it wrong.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah, I love a quarterback sneak, pick six. See, these things I know, so I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
RPO.
Don't know what that is.
Run pass.
Yeah, you made it up.
That's actually big in college sports, not so big in the NFL, where the quarterback takes the snap, the running back will run by to take a handoff, and the quarterback in the moment, almost like improvisation, like a Fish concert, man, they can choose to hand the ball off to the running back or keep it and search for a downfield receiver or a tight end who also can catch the ball to pass it, or he can choose to run.
So that's why Oliver wants to be that, because he can catch the ball, but he's not a super fast. I think he wants to be a running back, but it's not going to happen because he's not a fast runner. So
wasn't born with Jimmy's speed.
Right. It's like, I think I'm going to be a tight end. Yeah.
Well, tight ends are cool because you can catch, you act as a receiver, but they're also normally bigger and they block a lot. They block along with the offensive line. So when you do a running play, a tight end is oftentimes part of the offensive line and will block a defender to create a running lane. It's like, Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah.
Greatest tight end to ever play. He was a tight end who could block, he could catch the ball, he could run with the ball, all that stuff.
I asked Oliver if he could try to find a position where he doesn't get tackled a lot. Doesn't sound like this is it.
I picked the wrong position for that. I think you're looking for punter.
Quarterback.
No, quarterback you get. Well, I mean, I guess the rules are a little different, but you can still get.
Like in the grand scheme of things, I feel perhaps he gets tackled a little bit less. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, compared to a tight end, for sure. Yeah. I mean, tight end, you're in the trenches a lot. So he's going to be gouging defenders' eyes out. He's going to be stomping on their feet.
He's 9 years old.
You pranked him with a fucking snake in your attic.
He's got to toughen up. I also, didn't I on this podcast say that I just regularly let him watch horror movies and stuff when Jimmy's out of town? I'm building him up.
Yeah, CDC is getting knock on your door tomorrow.
Yeah, Child Protective Services as well. Well, this episode
for disease control. I don't know why I said that. I'm childless. I meant CPS.
I thought, interesting, because I thought you meant because I exposed him to the snake.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Cool. All right. So this episode we have my good friend Derek, one of the kindest, most humble, talented people I know in my life. And my favorite thing about Derek, something that I wish I had myself, is anytime you speak to Derek, he remembers what you spoke about the last time and asks you specifics. Like, how did that thing turn out that you were worried about? What a friend.
Yep. I mean, he even remembered your husband's name, which was really impressive.
Yeah.
Derek, I met him during the interview just now. So I've known him for less than 2 hours. And I will say the word that comes to mind is he is ebullient. He is very cheerful. He's so energetic. Mm-hmm. He just very happy. Mm-hmm. He seems like a very happy person at peace with himself, despite what we talk about, which discusses a lot of his, maybe self-imposed challenges or struggles to kind of take maybe the next leap in his career as a musician. But I think all things considered, from what I've learned and what I looked up about him, he seems to be doing pretty damn well for himself.
Yeah, I'm so proud of him.
Yeah, and it's a great chat. You guys are going to love it.
Yeah. So it's so nice to be so, just have friends and be like, I am genuinely just so proud of you. So glad to know you.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Proud of you.
God, that was so sarcastic.
Oh, it wasn't. I asked you to be the co-host. I think it's implied.
That's true. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, enjoy, Derek, and we'll see you next week. Derek, hi. Welcome to the Move Me Brightly podcast. Where are you?
I haven't. I'm in just in the night. I think I'm.
A creature of the night.
I don't know if you've seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but the scene when he's driving and it just
With Large March.
with Large March. That's where I.
Yeah.
Yeah, she sent me, and
And you made sure to bring your recording equipment, obviously, for your camping trip.
exactly.
Never leave home without a mic.
Yeah, especially the SM58. It's just a great, reliable mic.
I'm sure you know what you're talking about based on what you do for a living, which we'll get to. But I do want to say really quick, because you mentioned it, R.I.P. Paul Rubens. It's very sad.
I'm glad we're just going for the jugular right away.
Yeah.
Big part of my childhood. I see. Knowing the caliber of company that you hold with Blaine, that you're probably equally
Loved Pee-wee. Yeah, I went to I'm in Los Angeles, and I went to a retro screening of Pee-wee's Big Adventure at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood just a couple of years ago, and it was one of the greatest theatrical experiences ever. It was all like people in their 30s, like me, just giggling like they're 5 years old again. Like sold out, 500-seat theater, beautiful old theater built in the 1920s, like old Hollywood. And they did a big retrospective, and I think it was Bill Hader, maybe. It was a series where like they have a bunch of actors and filmmakers introduce just a movie that they love. You know, like you just pick whatever and present it. And he presented it, was like, I think this is like one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, and it really means a lot to me. And then we just watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and it was fantastic.
That's remarkable. So we moved to Atlanta from Los Angeles, and my wife and I were just talking about one of her fondest memories was, at the Hollywood Cemetery. A lot of times they show stuff, and she saw through there, and Paul made a cameo appearance, and she's seen a lot of folks that I am impressed by. She saw Michael Jordan. I was like, wow, that's so cool. But
that would freak me out.
He holds like that was a very special place in memory files.
Those cemetery screenings are really, really fun.
Yes,
really fun.
That one, because I was touring and I was really sad about that.
Blaine, I don't know if you know about this, but there's this place called the Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Los Angeles, where a lot of famous people are buried. And in the summer, they hold screenings that they just project films up against a large cement wall. And you go and you picnic. You can bring food and drinks, and they have little like streetcar vendors there as well. They normally have like a DJ performing before and after. Sometimes, like in the case of Pee-wee, they'll have an actor or director just kind of show up with a mic and either introduce it or talk about it afterwards. And they'll do like double features. They'll do all-night screenings. I think this weekend they're doing the 2 Kill Bill movies as like an all-nighter. Like it starts at like 9 or 9:30, whenever it gets fully dark, and it's going to go till 2 a.m, something like that. So good time if you're ever in LA. It's worth doing.
I really can't imagine anything that would be more up my alley. Derek, you know my deep love of Ghost.
It's true. Blaine has a great taste in basically our, the movies we all grew up with, but I feel like you really excel in it.
What's the Ghost thing? What is this?
So I hate to dive right into it, but since we're here, and you guys brought up the cemetery, not me, probably 15 years ago. When did you guys move back from LA?
I think that was like 2013-ish, so about 10, 11 years ago.
Okay. I was out to dinner with Derek and his wife, and I like very sheepishly was like, I'm doing this new photo series, and I don't want you guys to think I'm weird, but it's like all about ghost and ghost stories, and it takes place in Savannah, and then his wife. Do you mind if I say her name just for my own ease?
I don't know if I was allowed. Yeah.
Sarah, who has known me forever, jumped right in and was like, I'm into it. This is great. Let's keep talking. And then I was like, Derek, like, what do you think about this? And Derek was incredibly supportive. And Derek, do you want to tell us the news about you and Ghost?
The news? Well, I mean, at the time, the band that I was in, we had just played a venue called The Rave in Milwaukee. And everybody, when we showed up, it was like, has anyone told you about this place? There was this like crazy lady with like, she looked like straight out of Witches. And we were like, we're just, getting the lay of the land, like actually see if we can use the restroom. And she's like, come up here. She like took us to this room with like pictures of like the families from years and years. And this is like a Masonic lodge that was converted into a venue, and it is huge. And it was just crazy. She told us story after story after story about all these things that happened there. And we were all like, what? Who is this amazing person? And she took us on a little tour. And I mean, I don't know how in depth you want me to go here, but essentially,
Very, very.
like legends. And so we were kind of like, well, this is kind of weird. And then we got online and started looking around, and it was like, oh my gosh, this thing's been on like Ghost Hunters, and all these different shows had been to this venue. And so we took a tour with this one other guy that worked there, and he showed us around. And there's a pool where like these kids apparently drowned, and they like just run around, like all people hear them all the time. And we heard all these stories about it, and it was just remarkable. And I think the thing that really resonated seemingly with Blaine was that like literally, I think it was like 3 days before we had gotten there, there was like a rock concert, like a bro rock thing. It was I think Shinedown was playing. I think those guys are awesome. And Buck Cherry was playing, and they there was a big sign in the boiler room, and it said like, do not move this chair. And all of us were like, what is that? Like, and it looked like straight out of a movie, like a creepy, like, I don't know who wrote this kind of thing. And we were like, what's the story with that? And he was like, oh, like 3 days ago, like Buck Cherry, and I think it was Shinedown, forgive me if I'm wrong, were playing. And first of all, they had these amazing caves in like caverns that basically during Prohibition, this was the place where they had the stock. And they had it like these tunnels would go all the way to the governmental buildings and all around Milwaukee. And so the lead singer of Buck Cherry was like, I'm going to go check it out. And he went into one of these things, and the door locked behind him, and he was stuck in this thing all day. It was like freaking out, and people couldn't find him. Like phones weren't working, and they thought like it was just crazy. And then luckily they did, figure out what happened, but it was really kind of intense. And so then during the show, one of the bands was on, and the other band found this sign in the boiler room that said, do not move this chair. And they were like, kind of like, what? This is stupid. And the guy at the venue was like, don't move it. And the band guys, he was just like, whatever. And he took the chair and he moved it. And they said the second he did it, all the power in the building went out. And like the band couldn't play, and all these people got mad that were watching the show, and like everybody was freaked out. And then like a few minutes later, all the power came back on, and the chair was back in the spot. And I was like,
whoa.
Can you imagine my joy at that story the first time I heard it?
This is the house-powered chair. You cannot move the chair. It's so funny to me too. Like that's a really great story. But I also think like if you're the venue, if you know something like that's going to happen, you make the sign a little bit more detailed. Power will turn off if you move this chair. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, just trust me, okay? The power will go out, and you won't be able to perform if you move this chair. I feel like that would have solved the problem, But then you wouldn't have this amazing story.
Yeah, and I mean it continued to go on, and I won't bore you with it, but there was like right across the street from the Ambassador Hotel where Jeffrey Dahmer had done all these crazy, I guess, I don't even know what the word is, atrocities, but yeah, that place has got some history, and we had so much fun. I think that day we talked about it forever, and there were even more and more stories of our experience there, and it was just, yeah, that was a great, I don't know, great bonding time for us, Blaine. I feel like we really
truly. Truly.
I love this.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I'm a huge horror movie fan, if you couldn't tell by my Nosferatu poster hanging back there. So this all this type of stuff just makes me very, very happy and excited. I could talk about it the entire episode.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even fully know what you guys normally talk about, but I assume that this is not it.
No, this is kind of it.
Do a little chit chat, usually about horror movies in the front. So this is perfect. So Derek, could you just give us kind of like a 2-paragraph, how you got started, what you did, where you are?
Wow.
I know, not to hit you with a hard question first, but
2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people probably wondering who this guy is. So I'm Derek Mount. I was born in the STL, St. Louis, and my family at one point watched Back to the Future, and I saw Michael J. Fox blow up the house, and I was like, that's what I have to do for the rest of my life, especially with the guitar solo he played at the Enchantment of the Sea dance. And I begged my family for a guitar forever, and we didn't have one, and my mom and dad were like, hey, this lady down the street won The Price is Right. She wanted a car and was mad, so she was selling everything she won, and so she sold the piano that she won. So my parents bought that piano, and my mom taught me how to play when I was a kid, and I just fell in love with music. My uncle eventually gave me my first guitar when I was 13, and I played it until last year. We gave it to somebody else who was starting to learn, and I hope it continued the tradition. But yeah, I just became kind of obsessed with music, and it ranged from everything from Van Halen to Tears for Fears to Iron Maiden, and it was really 80s heavy stuff that kind of blew my mind and first got me really into that. And went to the University of Georgia, where I met my amazing wife, which is how I also met Blaine, and I guess indirectly kind of how I met Tom. When I was there, I was studying music. I was a full-time student, but I was also a full-time musician. So I was teaching a lot of guitar lessons. I played a lot of church gigs. I was in rock bands and did a little bit of touring when I was in college. And then after school, I joined a band called Family Force 5, and it was at the time called The Family. We got a cease and desist letter from one of our heroes, Prince, because he had a band called The Family back in the 80s, and it was kind of one of the most proud moments of our lives. Even
I was gonna say, you're on Prince's radar.
Yeah, I really grew up listening to all this stuff, so that was pretty special. But we changed our name, and I'm really grateful for our journey. We had I did that for 12 years. We toured the world. We got to meet a lot of our heroes and play with a lot of bands that I loved, and write with amazing people and amazing studios. And through that journey, I started writing a lot for other projects too. So I wrote for some movies and started scoring some projects, and then eventually that kind of turned into its own world, where now I have a company called Man Night Music, and that's the umbrella for my publishing and record label. And I have all these different projects that range from alternative rock, like Club Danger is one of our brands or bands, and we make music that's great for things like sports or video games or ads. And then I have another project called Bric-a-Brac that's complete opposite. It's ambient, cinematic, modern classical stuff that works well on like the NPR, National Geographic kind of space, and then other projects too. And so right now what I mostly do is make music with the hopes of landing it in film, TV, ads, video games, things like that. I also do some custom work. Scored a video game earlier this year that was really fun. Also, sometimes just play on normal pop records and rock records and dance and things like that, and write and get to tour a little bit still, which I'm so grateful for. I love doing that, but I'm most importantly focusing on trying to be a great husband and father. And the most exciting thing by far is that we just had baby number 2 about 2 weeks ago. No, not even. It was born 13 days ago. So
Congratulations.
Filled with gratitude. Thank you so much.
That's why you're hiding in the dark, so you don't wake the baby.
Exactly.
Of course. Now we know. I was listening to some of your music earlier today, and I gotta say, I really love Bric-a-Brac. I was watching, to go back to horror again, I apologize, but I was watching the Netflix show The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is by Mike Flanagan, the same guy who did the Haunting of Hill House TV show on Netflix. It's this very period piece, late 80s England, almost like Victorian era, but 1980s style. And your song, I probably am going to mispronounce, but Rual?
Oh, yeah.
Well?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was listening to that right after I had watched an episode of that show, and I was just thinking, like, this would fit perfectly in this style of TV show. You know, like very kind of atmospheric, like very, very good cinematic imagery, like kind of like languid, peaceful, like tranquil setting music, but a little bit like uneasy, kind of, you know, like it's building towards something. Like feels like there's a little bit of suspense like being built in the song itself. So I was a big fan of that. I also want to ask you about Juno Kids.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Are you still associated with that band at all?
Yeah, Juno Kids is so fun. That's one of my best friends in the whole world, Philip Zock. And we started just basically, we made rules. And the rule was like, we're going to make an entire record with one instrument only. And it was a Juno, the synthesizer. And we tried to make every sound from that thing. And it was kind of in that maybe Stranger Things space, or like where, you know, the Tron, Blade Runner kind of soundtrack, or, you know, something like Drive. And I really, really love analog synthesizers, and that probably fits that horror space a little bit too.
Yeah, well, that's probably why, I mean, all the references you're laying out is probably why I liked Juno Kids so much, because I love the Drive soundtrack, love the Blade Runner soundtrack, love the Tron soundtrack. So that's right up my alley. So I was a big fan of that. And I mean, it just seems like you kind of said it, but your musical ability and also where your interests lie are so diverse. And you mentioned that your goal is basically to create music that you can lay into licensing rights for music, television, video games, commercials, whatever. Are you thinking more in that way now, like the commercial viability of your artistry, or is it kind of a mix of this is what I want to do and I hope it finds a home somewhere?
Oh, that's such a great question. And it's kind of chicken and the egg. And honestly, it varies a little bit. My real goal is to make music I love with people I love for projects that I love. I think a lot of times when we start with the idea of like, we're going to try to make something that's perfect for fill in the blank because, we really want to land it there. That's a fun thing if it's a fun thing. And so in my mind, I often almost pretend hire myself for gigs that I would love. So I think like, oh man, I'd love to score this Christopher Nolan next Batman film, or, and almost pretend that I hire myself and watch something and turn off all the sound and just make the music that kind of comes out. And when I'm doing that, that's really life-giving to me. That's really fun and inspiring. Or just when, like I said, with Phil, where we're like basically coming up with boundaries or rules to kind of make a game out of it. I think a lot of times we'll get something like a brief. We have reps that might say, hey, we have a relationship with this show, the music supervisor, and they're looking for songs that fit this mold. We want like female vocals and these kinds of lyrics and, these kinds of instruments that can be like a little restrictive if it's not the vibe that you're wanting to do. And so it can also be amazing if you choose to go like, oh, dude, yeah, let's make something that fits that, but is like really creative and cool. And so this is probably a poor business decision, but I think a really good, hopefully big picture decision is I don't often try to just hit the target that we're going for. And it's the same way with streaming things. So getting things in playlists is another big part of what I like to do. And I think there are times when you can tell like there's a little bit of a formula to a playlist, and you might hurt your chances of it getting in there by doing something a little crazier. But I think all of my favorite artists and most of the ones that the world needs, they kind of do something rad, and then hopefully it finds its way to where it should be. If I'm getting hired to make something, which we call client work, it's a little different. And you really want to make them happy and deliver what they're looking for, which you still try to make that awesome. But the main goal is to make something that's special. I think when people think of, hey, you're making stuff for licensing, a lot of times people are like, do you make jingles? That is so far from what we're trying to do. We want to make real art. And I also want, one of my favorite things in the world is that Bric-a-Brac and Club Danger and Viceroy and some of these projects are starting to get, people that are actual fans, even though sometimes at first it was like, oh, we wrote a song for Monday Night Football, but now it's like, oh, like people dig what we're doing. So that was a long answer, but I hope it kind of...
No, that was great. I did have a question to follow up on something you said when you mentioned getting onto a playlist. So talking about an app like Spotify or Apple Music, when you say getting on a playlist, do you specifically mean application-driven playlists, like a playlist that Spotify makes that is like 70s road trip rock, and it's like one of their featured playlists that is just on everyone's front page? They click on, they hit shuffle, and it's got Elton John and Creedence and all that stuff like that. Are you talking about that, or are you talking about user-generated playlists that become popular kind of organically and kind of almost through like not word of mouth, but through listening of ears, kind of grows in popularity and you get more listeners because of that?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking great questions. I love how informed you are about that world.
I'm not. I'm totally winging this shit right now.
Those of you out there that may or may not be, there's three main types of playlists and things like Spotify. I'll use that one as the example because it's probably the one most people are familiar with. But we have user-curated playlists, which could be like you and I make one for our jogging playlist, and then there's also algorithmic playlists, which Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon, a lot of those, they literally are just based upon like the way people interact with your music and what they think it's similar to. And there's like fingerprinting process sometimes that's kind of talking about what you're related to. And then the third type is editorial playlist, which means there's a team at Spotify and it's their job to choose, hey, I'm in charge of Rap Caviar, and this is the type of vibe I'm going for. And or like for Bric-a-Brac, Peaceful Piano would be kind of mecca. That's what we're always hoping to land on, our deep focus. And I say all the above. I am kind of embarrassed to admit this, but like I'm very, very, very driven about trying to hit goals and grow these brands. So I have spreadsheets that's multiple screens of all the targets of like how we're trying to land on different playlists and how to find the curators of them and how to tactfully and respectfully approach them and pitch material for that. So sometimes that's user curated, and but ultimately, like what you want is what I want are real humans to love the songs and interact with them, and the more they save them and stream them and share them and follow the projects, which, by the way, if you're a fan of an artist or a band and you follow them, that really makes a big difference for them. But the more that activity happens, the more likely it is to trigger an algorithmic play. And that's when you show up when people are on like, oh, here's your daily mix and here's your release radar and all those kinds of things. And the editorials it's lightning in a bottle. It's catching the unicorn. And I'm so grateful. I have landed on a few. But man, I've written, I have done I watched every video that's ever been made and every tutorial that's ever been made, and been to open houses by Spotify and Apple Music and all these places trying to figure it out. And it's a wild west, and it's an amazing new journey that we're in. And I mean, the funny thing about what we're doing is like, in the old days, there was like a gatekeeper that was the radio, director, or basically, and you'd go wine and dine them and be like, oh, could we get our song on radio? And now it's literally like, sometimes there's a 13-year-old kid in Germany who has a big rock playlist that I think Love Danger should be on, and I'm using Google Translate to try to get this kid to put my song on his playlist and go on, we'll mention it on Instagram or whatever. It's just a funny world. So our industry has been drastically changed, and I think we have to embrace it in a really cool way. I'm getting so long. Get excited about this. I'm sorry.
No, it's wonderful. I mean, I think there is so much music out there now that it is really hard to find an audience. And I know, looking at you on Spotify, which is generally the music app that I use, I mean, I think it's amazing that you have multiple projects that already have, 250,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. I think that already puts you in such a level that I think 90% of the artists on Spotify are still trying to reach. So I was wondering, you mentioned that you were fortunate enough to be on a couple of those curated playlists before. Did you see an exponential growth in your listenership because specifically of moments like that? Like you were put on a Peaceful Piano playlist or something?
Yeah, I've never been on Peaceful Piano. That one would be amazing. But yeah, it really does move the needle a lot when you can get on a playlist. For instance, Bric-a-Brac was on Intense Study. That one really definitely took the monthly listeners up higher, and clearly, we all would love to see those numbers higher, but there really is a moment where you just have to be grateful that there's anybody paying attention right now, because no matter what area of art you're in, I think we're all kind of facing volume as a new piece of the puzzle that wasn't there before. When I was in a band that was signed back in the day to a traditional record label, it was like, oh, there's a handful of artists making a handful of records that is very digestible by most people, and they can all choose which one they like the most, and if they buy your record, they're going to listen to it a few times, and the songs that they don't love at first, maybe they love after a few listens. We live in a world where there are literally 120,000 songs coming out on a lot of days. And that is impossible for everybody to listen to. And a lot of them are made but in a few minutes by somebody using AI or using, GarageBand. And so the barrier to entry is so low that I think for all of us, there's so many people that really get freaked out about it. But to me, I just am so grateful. Anytime anyone's listening, it just I know how hard it is for me to carve out a few minutes to listen to a new record by one of my favorite artists, because there's so much coming at us we don't even know. So whether you're making, music or actual art like Blaine is, or Tom, I'm embarrassed, I don't even know what you do.
I'm a film producer in LA.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot more of that as well. And I just think getting attention, anytime someone pays attention to what we're doing, it's really a gift, and I'm just grateful. So I'd love to see those numbers higher, but man, gratitude is what I'm really trying to cultivate.
Yeah, I feel like it's the double-edged sword where there are so many more artists out there than there used to be, but you also have the benefit of visibility or publication, which, like you said, was in the hands of a few, golden gods back in the day. Now everyone can get their stuff out to the world. It's just a matter of getting eyes or ears on it and kind of sifting your way through the masses on that level. And I know from the film side of things, what's really interesting is, it used to be a handful of movies every month would come out in theaters, and that was the only way you could watch a movie was you go to the cinema, and that's it. And those were the only movies getting made. So there were a handful of people directing, handful of actors, and now it's everywhere. And there was a period where I wanted to watch everything. I wanted to watch every new movie that came out, and you just realize you are digging yourself into a bottomless pit where the more you seek out and the more you discover, the more you find. And you will never run out of new stuff nowadays to take in. Like there was a period where I was trying to watch every, decently rated foreign film that came out in the year 2017. And as I got through 60 of them, okay, now I know 3,000 more of these because I just opened myself up to learning about more of them. And you kind of reach a point of like, how do you even make the time to choose? Like, you'll never know, no matter how many movies I decide to watch, I will never know if I passed on what would have been my favorite film of all time, just because the sheer volume of what's out there now is so great that it's kind of like an existential problem to kind of reckon with as a consumer, you know?
You view that as a good thing or a bad thing? Clearly,
I mean, I think it's good that there is more out there and more voices out there to choose from. I think overall, I like the idea of more out in the world, but I think the way it has become commodified is worse than it has been in the past. Like, I know for you as a musician, I'm sure you deal with this very intimately. If you were with all of the bands you have, if you were signed to traditional record deals and you were putting out CDs versus putting your music on Spotify, if you had the amount of listeners buying your records as you do on Spotify, you would make 1,000 times more money than you do right now on Spotify. You know, like I know a little bit about the way their system operates and play counts versus royalties that you receive. And it's the same thing right now in the film industry with streaming platforms like Netflix and Hulu and everything. Like, I know also a lot of streamers are creating content that they call second screen content. They're specifically seeking out films and TV show projects that they think will be good for people to watch in the background while they're on their phone.
wow.
Yeah, like they actually seek out those types of projects that are just really filler. If you don't pay attention to 2 episodes, and then at episode 4 of the season you're kind of locked back in, it doesn't matter. You didn't miss anything important, you know. So I think there's some like commodification ideas there that aren't great, but I love the fact that, as opposed to when I was 5 years old, there were 20 cool horror movies that came out in a year. Now there's 250, and I can kind of find the ones that are really great.
Wait, I need to hear from you a little bit here.
I'm kind of frozen because there's so many things that I want to ask you. But also, you so rarely tell me about you that I really want to listen. I mean, I don't actually, like, we've hung out all of these times and we're talking about the dogs, or you're asking insightful questions about me. And this has just been so refreshing to hear you say everything that you've been doing. And I just feel like such a proud friend. I have a couple of questions that I want to throw out there that I think might be worth talking about. And you tell me what you want to answer. I'm interested in touching on your basketball and your cycling, and sort of bringing together the idea, one of my favorite ideas, of the way you do one thing is the way you do all things. So how those tie together with your music. I'd love to talk about that. And then I would also love to talk about that idea you told me one time of the 3 circles. You're, like, if it pays well, if it's a good hang, if you like the project or something, that's a fascinating concept to me. And we can cut together which one you want to answer. But what do you feel most passionate about talking about?
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll quickly talk about the circles because that could be like 5 seconds. But that's about touring specifically. And then I didn't come up with this. In fact, I don't know who did, but I heard it from a friend of mine where I was asked to play a gig, and I was like, man, I'm really having a hard time deciding if I should go on this tour. And he was like, well, let's talk about which of the boxes does it check, or the circles. And I was like, what are you talking about? So the 3 are, the music, the pay, and the hang. And basically, when you're thinking about a gig, you kind of take those into account. And usually, if there's 0 of the 3, you should probably not take the gig. If there's 1 of the 3, I usually would say probably not, unless, like, to me, if it's the hang, and it's just like your best buds and you get to go somewhere awesome or even really crappy, which is really fun too, then sometimes I think that might be worth the 1 that you would take. But if it's got 2, maybe you take it. And if it's got all 3, then I'd say usually you should take it. And I'm grateful that lately I've been playing with an artist named Crowder a little bit, and he's just a free pub for him. I love that guy and his team. And that checks all 3. Those guys are just I love the music and the hang, and we just have so much fun. So always want to mention David. And I played also recently with a friend of mine named Santanez, and that was just a blast too. So yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about. I'm sure it might be like the same for you with a client. Maybe you probably have to consider, is this a fun, life-giving project? Do I love this client, and is it going to grow? Maybe you have different boxes, I would assume. But
actually, this week went on a shoot. It was half photography, half video, and I went with my friend David Turner, who you know, and I've never collaborated with him before, but one of my favorite people. And we had to the idea was we had to market a senior living facility. So the parameters, which you were talking about earlier, were so narrow, right? Like I couldn't just go like market $1 million house like I'm used to, or I couldn't go do something really creative. It was a very narrowly constrained thing. And the creativity that I think came out of that was amazing. And I know exactly what you were talking about earlier about putting some tight parameters on something to foster creativity. And then also just like the hang was so great.
yeah. And that's what, I can't speak for you or Tom, but at least in music, isn't that kind of why we do this thing? Is like, there are so many other ways to make a dollar or to get known. And I mean, obviously we all do different things for different reasons. There's a great book out there, Wishcraft, with WISH, and it talks about like finding the touchstone. Like if you want to be a baseball player, is it because you love baseball, or is it because you love for people to recognize you, or is it because you love to travel the world, or is it because whatever the reason is? But like, man, I mean, for me, with music, there's just I think some of my big touchstones. One of them is like significance. I really want to do something that really does inspire people and matters to them. I think that seems like the vibe I get from both of y'all. But also, man, just joy. It is one of the few like things that I can do that feels like real medicine. Like, I don't know if you guys feel that way, but when you make an amazing something that you're proud of, it just feels like there is a physical relief that comes through your body of like, oh, that needed to get out. Like I was playing with my friend Riley and we had a session in Nashville the other day, and one of our favorite artists to work with is Bo Williams. He's this hip hop artist who's so talented, and we were just texting him, we're like, man, we got to finish this song, and he was like, well, I would, but I'm in Nashville. We're like, oh, we're all in Nashville too. He's like, I'm coming over, and he just came over, and we're gonna finish the song, and he's like, dude, I don't know why I've been listening to White Stripes, and I just want to do a song where it's like just vocals, one drum, and guitar. And he's like, we're not layering things, we're not going to synthesize it, we just like make it raw and just like angry, and we just like turned everything on and just ripped, and it was so fun. And he's just like screaming, he was just like, oh, that's it, let's go. Bo, if you know Bo, he's just like the most hype person you've ever met. Right now he's like has a billboard in LA right now with a big picture of him. But I don't know, there's something about, like, to me, it's like I would pay to have that experience. That was one of the highlights of the year. One of the highlights of my life was just like how much fun we had, and it was stupid. We stayed up way too late. We're all dads now. Bo's not, but Riley and we're going to bed at the time we normally get up. But like, it's just like, man, you can't replace that feeling. And I imagine every now and again make something awesome. It just feels that way. Sorry, Bill.
No,
I think that's what separates musicians from other artists too, and why I love hanging out with musicians so much is because there is such a greater energy expenditure with the musician versus like Blaine painting or me standing around on a film set. You get like the amount of sweat equity that is put into performing a song or rehearsing as a band or whatever, I think is much more immediate And there is that catharsis that I think, and Blaine, I want you to speak on this as well, but I know, like, for me, as a film producer, my favorite part is actually being on set. It's not even seeing the finished product of the movie necessarily. Like, that's a great experience when it's all edited and sound mixed and whatever, and color corrected, and you can actually see the finished product. But it's really the act of being on set with a bunch of different creative people from different departments, the makeup department, the cinematographer, the lighting technician, the wardrobe specialist, whoever. And you're all just there, like, creating something to have these few seconds of image that you're shooting to later be projected for however many people to see. And it's just watching all these creative people come together in that environment and utilize everyone's strengths to create something that is towards a unified goal. Like, that collaborative energy is what really gets me going. But yeah, it's not like music in the way where I mean, sometimes I am running around like a chicken with my head cut off because there's some crisis or some fire that needs to be put out. But normally by that point, as a producer, when I'm on set, most of my job is almost done. Like, a lot of it is in the prep and organizing everything, getting everybody up and running and ready to roll. So at that point, I can kind of just, I'm like an old mafia don sitting back, smoking a cigar, being like, my children, we're all here doing it. I love my family so much, you know? Yeah, Blaine, what about for you?
Well, so I was going to say, going back to that shoot I did earlier, I do a lot of different things. And if I really had to whittle down the thing that I love most about making art, be it podcasts or photos or painting, whatever, writing, I do all of those things. And I think the heart of all of those things is that I just love stories. And sometimes if you can really get at the heart of a story, that's like some weird universe magic, kind of like, it's the most magical thing. It's sort of like watching a little miracle happen in front of you if you can really get to that thing. And we were on this shoot, and it had nothing to do with anything that I'm interested in. And we sat down in front of this lady, and she was telling us her story, and she was talking to us about how she had spent like 50 years being a lunch lady in a prison, and how that had like informed her later life decisions. And I was like, how crazy is it that I'm here doing this thing that's not my thing, collaborating. We're doing video, which I don't do. And somehow the universe just kind of like gave me this little nugget of like this thing that's so cool, and that, I don't know, that makes it all worth it when you're, that when you're living in that moment of like, I know that it's like a God wink or a universe wink or so, you're like, it's almost like a deja vu of this is all worth it because I got this cool thing.
So Blaine, I would say, based on what you just said, discovering a story out of thin air is basically the same thing as giving birth to a child. Would you agree with that?
I mean, it's not that cool, but there's so few moments in life of surprises. And I think, honestly, having a child is one of the last few real moments of surprise in your life. And then there's certain other ones that you can kind of force through art.
Did you not know you were pregnant? Did you go to the hospital? Like, what is this?
You spend 9 months imagining, like, what does this child look like? What will they be like? Will they look like me? Will they look like my husband? It's like a life's greatest mystery,
Will they look like the mailman?
Hopefully not.
Please God, please God, please God. Winding back the calendar. Sorry.
A big fan of what?
Oliver and Quint. They're just great. They're
good kids. Yeah.
I haven't met them in person.
Oh, they're magical little guys. So is Baxi, though. I just want to bottle that baby up and just keep him with me.
Bottle of Bax would be that'd be some bottle right there.
Is Bax your firstborn?
Baxter is our first. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Roan was the one that was just born.
Rhone, Irish name.
Well, it's funny you say that. So you're the second person that has said that to me.
And I'm wrong.
Well, it may be. In my mind, it's not. I'll tell you what the name to me. My wife and I really enjoy wine, and there's a wine called the Chateau de Pape. It's also a region in France, and we went and did a tasting there, and it was just beautiful. It was incredible. It's in this cave, and the sommelier was telling us that one of the things that makes it so special is they intentionally don't water the vines, and they get like shriveled up, and there's this crazy wind in that region, and they're almost basically going to die, but there's a source of water that goes underneath the ground, and the roots are forced to just keep going down and down and down and down until they hit that water. And they've been doing this for thousands of years. And so the result is that they just have this robust system, and they are so deeply rooted that it produces a fruit that is like, you just can't recreate it anywhere else. And if you enjoy wine, which I do, it's just truly a really, really special experience. And so that was kind of the river, the Rhone River is what runs through that region. And so we named him after that, with the idea of being really deeply rooted and really connected to a source, and being able to bear good fruit despite hardship. And so that was what to me it means, which is almost, it feels like it may be French. But you're the second person that said it.
Well, that's a very beautiful story, and I'm going to follow that up with a very stupid comment. And the reason why I think I said it was Irish is because I'm thinking of the movie, The Story of Roan Inish. That's what I heard, Inish, and thought Irish.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. This is great.
I'll be logging off now. It was a pleasure. It's been fun doing this podcast. Unfortunately, I have to quit it, obviously, because I'm mortified.
Great bit. Somebody else thought it was Irish too, so maybe
Maybe they saw the movie.
something to that.
Yeah, maybe they saw the movie. I'm pretty sure that's a movie. Maybe it's a book too. But The Secret of Roan Inish.
Familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll link to it below in the description. Everybody go run. Gonna get that movie brightly bumped. The Secret of Roan Inish. Amazon's gonna be like, what the hell? This movie just made us $1 million this week.
And wait, Blaine, I really love talking about some of the other things that you were talking about, those sports. I mean, so if there's a way to
Snake back.
Hit me with the basketball talk. I'm ready.
well, yeah, I mean, when you say that, I'd love to have you elaborate a little bit about what you.
So, you know, as someone with obsessive personality, I, can recognize that a little bit in you, which I mean is the highest compliment, because it is something that I love about myself. But, you can really sink your teeth into a hobby and really get in there. And I love that. And, I know that when you were playing basketball, that was like a very, very big deal in your life. And I know you had an injury, and that's unfortunate. And we've switched to the bike riding, which now seems to be equally as important in such a short time. And then we've got, Georgia football, which I don't know anyone that knows more about the Dogs than you do. And I certainly feel lucky to be on your Dogs text, because I now know a lot more about them as well. So I just really like that about you.
Thank you. It's a little embarrassing at times how much I get into these things and how much joy they bring me. But
Been there.
yeah,
That should never be embarrassing, I don't think. Like to have a passion and love for something, no matter how seemingly like minor it may be in the scope of your life, like to have that is a treat and a rare gift, honestly.
it really is. It's in fact, like tomorrow, I've charted out the route that I'm going to ride. It's a special day where I'm going to ride this cool path that I've been wanting to ride, and I'm training right now for a 120-mile ride with some friends, and it's kind of like being in a band in a way. Like you just all our buddies were like texting about like the ways we're training and even the nutrition that we're trying to put in our bodies in order to be at our best. And I do feel like maybe this is a result of growing up in a household where my dad is just obsessed with sports, and I was too, and I just loved watching everything and playing everything. And it's funny, like no matter what amount of I guess like enjoying whatever I'm doing in my life, it always feels like a little bit of like, oh, I could have just made it in some sport, to a level like that would have really achieved what I was supposed to do, which is so funny. Like, I don't know where that comes from, but yeah, my wife's boss is the first one that kind of got me into cycling, and he was so kind to like let me borrow his bike for a while and gave me a helmet and taught me a lot of stuff. And then I just like got in on this YouTube of like, oh, what about this style of training? And maybe we should go overseas right here. And, and now every time I hit him up, he's just like, dude, you're crazy. Like, he's like, awesome. But like, he's like, the rest of us just like ride, and you're like really into it. It's like that. And I mean, I always joke about like, I have no clue how people get bored. I don't know the last time I was bored. Anytime there's a spare second, it's like, oh man, I can't wait to go. Whether it's like learn about the cycling thing or I still love, like you said, George, football, basketball, or in guitar has always been really that thing that I can just read about Eddie Van Halen all day. And it's just like, we foiled his guitar strings. I was just like, I feel like there's so much fun to dig into when we have something that we really love. And I think that is one of the things that makes all of us musicians and artists a little quirky and a little like where we have to check ourselves sometimes. Sometimes Sarah will be like, Derek, you were really talking about that for a while at that party. And I'm like, but it was so fun. It was so cool.
My dad's very much like this too. He's really into dirt bike riding. He was really into motorcycle riding for a while. He's kind of aged out of that. He's doing really long, like cross-country motorcycle rides now. He's more into like the off-road dirt bike riding, and he retired last year or so. Now he just has all this free time. And whenever I see him, he is on his iPad watching GoPro helmet videos of dirt bike riders, watching back their own footage of the ride they just took and doing commentary over it of like, yeah, I should have turned a little quicker there. I missed that jump. There was like just all this stuff, and it's just what he does now. Yeah, like 5 years ago, never rode a dirt bike in his life, and now it's everything to this man. It's like all he cares about in the world. Yeah.
I always say, he's like, that's your Clark Kent thing, like that's like
your alter ego. Yeah.
Or like, do you have a thing like if you watch like Rocky, are you like, oh man, like I wish I was a boxer? Like,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I remember, and this obviously completely goes against what the point of the movie was trying to do, but again, I was 13, so give me a little bit of a break. But I remember being 13 and seeing Fight Club in theaters and just immediately wanting to beat the shit out of my little brother, our previous guest, Cliff, because I wanted to start a fight club with him, which again, not the point of that movie. Toxic masculinity is bad. I get that. But totally, I went through Rocky binges where growing up, my dad had in our garage one of those like dummy pad things that were weighted on the bottom. And it was a full body with like two stiff arms that you could punch. And it was almost like a boxing pad. And I remember I just used to go up and just spear that thing. I would give it like Stone Cold Stunners, just like all the non-boxing boxing fighting you could do. Just imagining it was like the 10th round and I'm like fading to the champ, and you just gotta like get that last boost of energy.
Yeah, I hope you got that energy.
I back then I did. I don't have it anymore, but that's okay. Speaking of that, so the thesis of this podcast, which you're a terrible guest for now that we've talked for a little while, is speaking with creative people. speaking with creative people who have turned their creative passion into a career and any burnout they might experience. And it sounds like you are someone who is so naturally curious and passionate that I get the sense you don't really experience that too much when it comes to music. Or is it more you channel any type of burnout or feelings of exhaustion from your musical career into these other hobbies like basketball previously, cycling, watching sports, that kind of thing?
Wow, great question. And I'm sorry it took this long before we got to your amazing thesis, by the way. No, I don't want to deceive or fool anyone. Burnout is a very real danger, I think, to all of us. Anyone who really does it should get to burnout in order to achieve the level of excellence that I think we all want. You have to do it kind of to a mind-numbing degree. And you, Blaine, were saying something that I just found, and I want to pull this up. I wish I could take credit for this. This guy named David Ackert from the LA Times. And this is a little long, but I think it's going to say musicians, but I think artists should be what it should say is musicians are some of the most driven, courageous people on the face of the earth. They deal with more day-to-day rejection in 1 year than most people do in a lifetime. Every day they face the financial challenge of living a freelance lifestyle, the disrespect of people who think they should get real jobs, and their own fear that they'll never work again. Every day they have to ignore the possibility that the vision they have dedicated their lives to is a pipe dream. With every note, they stretch themselves emotionally, physically, and physically, risking criticism and judgment. With every passing year, many of them watch as other people their age achieve their predictable milestones in normal life: the car, the family, the house, the nest egg. Why? Because musicians are willing to give their entire lives to a moment, to that melody, that lyric, that chord, or that interpretation that will stir the audience's soul. Musicians are beings who have tasted life's nectar in that crystal moment when they poured out their creative spirit and touched another's heart. In that instant, they were as close to magic, God, and perfection as anyone could ever be. And in their own hearts, they know that to dedicate oneself to that moment is worth 1,000 lifetimes. And that is just something I actually loathe most social media. I apologize if some people don't. But that was one thing that came from it that I was like, dang, that was really cool.
Really cool.
Yeah, a friend of mine named Seth Mosley reposted that. And I just thought it was, I could relate to it. I imagine you guys can. Of just so many of the fears, the moments of like, is this really going to work? Is this really matter? And I face that all the time. Yeah, I luckily, I think I am very blessed with an amazing wife, an amazing family, amazing support system. I have my health, and I'm really grateful for all those things. And I think that really helps. I'm embarrassingly disciplined. I'm, always up at the same time and have the same routines and, hobbies like learning foreign languages. Those things kind of balance me in a really great way. But there is, oh man, there's so much rejection. There's so many times I'm watching a movie and I'm like, man, why is our song not in that seat? Or a show, and I'm watching sports. And I'm like, we have like 30 songs that should be here. What did I do wrong to like not get it there?
Seven Nation Army again, guys. Come on.
I do like that. It's great. Well, playlist, man, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, this song, this should have been in there. It's not. And somehow I botched it, or the pitch, or whatever the case. And I bang my head against the wall so many times trying to get what you were talking about as a monthly listener count. That, man, it feels so out of my control. I'm like, I want that number higher. I got to get higher. And I think those are great, great, great things. But they can be scary if we let them be. And so, personally, I'm going to go back to sports here for a second. Blaine and I, just so you know, we watch Georgia football together all the time. That's kind of our thing.
Oh, I know.
I look forward to it. I can't wait. I'm going to steal something that Kirby Smart, the coach, I think is known for, debatable how true it is. But like last year, the team had won the national championship, and before the season, most people were like, "Hey, they lost a lot of players in the NFL. They'll probably still be good, but maybe not quite as good. Maybe they'll be like third in the nation." And Kirby like took that as like, we just won the national championship. You're not putting us number one. Like, and he like went to the team and was basically like, everybody's doubting you. Everybody doesn't believe in you. They think the other teams are better than you. And like this team played angry, like the whole world was against them. And you know, in certain interviews, one of the guys was like, everybody was doubting us and thinking we are gonna like go 6-6, and it was like, no, everybody thought you were gonna be like 10-2 or 11-1. Nobody's really doubting you. But the team went on to like do amazing things by like believing this, not a lie, but like a truth that was extrapolated. And I try to do that in the opposite way with myself. For instance, like I was saying, one of my touchstones is I want to make stuff that matters. We pour our hearts into this stuff, and I really want it to touch somebody. And the biggest thing that I struggle with is, like we said, there's so much noise out there. There are songs that I am like so proud of, and I'm like, I don't know if anybody heard that. And I'd say like 99% of the people in my life don't even know any of the music that I've ever made. And that's probably kind of cool because I just don't want to like do self-promotion, but I'm also kind of like, is this stuff really mattering? And is it touching anybody? And so I almost have to trick myself and say, like, pretend that there's the pressure of like, yeah, you just got hired to score this and it's due today. And it better be awesome. And then I'm like, all right, let's go. I got a challenge. Like this morning I was making a song. There's no record label involved. There's no publisher involved. There's no timeline involved. The guy I'm working with is the most chill dude ever. He's this awesome composer up in Minnesota, and Chris Bartels. Chris wouldn't care if I finished the song next year. But in my brain, I was like, hey, this is due at 7:30 a.m. I've got to freaking go. I've got to get this done. I've got to make it amazing. And there are like a lot of fans that are waiting for this thing. And there's no fans waiting for this, but like I feel like I look back and, we had some moments with my old band where we just didn't hit deadlines or timelines. And I'm like, I'm not going to let that happen again. Like I'm making up these rules, but we're going to crush it, And I think that's really helpful for me. This is long-winded, but it's a good coping device, I think, for me to feel like this really does matter, really important. And I think another big thing for me is that this is like not anything I invented, but I heard on a podcast once, just a guy who every day, the very first thing he does when he wakes up is he thinks about something he's grateful for that happened yesterday, something he's grateful for that's happening today, and something he's grateful for that is going to happen in the future. And it's so silly. It seems like the easiest thing in the world. It takes about 5 seconds if you really do it. And it transforms your brain. It really does. When I wake up, if I wasn't doing that, what I usually do is, dang it, how am I going to get my monthly listeners higher? Dang it, how am I going to get these songs and these movies and these video games and these ads and these TV shows? And why am I not more successful yet? And dang it, like we've got work to do and there's a lot of it and I'm stressed out. But when you start your day that way, it's just such a different perspective of like, holy cow, I've got an amazing wife and amazing kids. And
I do that myself every morning. When I wake up, I just say thank you out loud to whatever, to the universe, to the cosmos. It's undefined, but I just do that. And I noticed once I started doing that, the entire perspective of my day and the things I had to do over the course of that day changed dramatically. Stress level went down dramatically because you're suddenly looking at things from a perspective of, not that I have to do this, but I get to do this now. Like I get to do this thing versus, I have to do this thing, And I think that's a major, like paradigm shift in your brain when you can look from that perspective. I think it's incredibly helpful. I wanted to talk briefly about what you were saying about being an artist and, having a certain level of talent and ability and being able to work on it as a career. I think one thing that is so underrated about people who are artists is just the fact that they hang around, that they don't quit. Because you were talking about like the idea of upping your monthly listeners can be scary, or the idea of like, what if nobody hears this thing that I'm making can be scary, and you can limit yourself. Like, I know there are plenty of great film directors that are working that I love, and I absolutely 100% know there are just as many filmmakers out there that would be among my favorites in the world that will never make a movie, that I'll never see make a movie because they just don't do it, or they don't stick it out, whether it's for financial reasons or they're just not willing to handle the constant rejection that you have to accept in a lifestyle like this. Like, it really is the people who just stick with it that so often find their way into this world, you know?
Law of attrition. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep feeding the lake. Was that Elizabeth Gilbert? Oh, no, that was from The Artist's Way, I think, right?
Love The Artist's Way. I also love Liz Gilbert. I mentioned her a couple times on this podcast.
Yeah.
Derek, we could go on for another 2 hours. I think this has been a wonderful conversation flow, and I am just thrilled to know a little bit more about you. And I feel like I already know you pretty well. So this has been lovely. Before we go, I was wondering what advice you would give to, a young college student trying to make it in the music biz.
That's a great question. And music biz can be so wide and varied. I almost would just say this more to an artist. And this is going to sound weird, and this is going to sound business-like, but I feel like most people are not good at getting to the space where they're doing deep work. I don't know if you've read Calvin Court stuff, but I am so blown away at how real the difference is of like my writing time is usually like 5:15 in the morning because there is no phone ringing. Nobody else is usually up. There's no emergency that's going to happen. There's no meeting that pops up. And the difference of writing like 2 hours at that time versus 6 hours at 2 in the afternoon when there's just so many distractions. It's unbelievable. It is really a massive, massive difference when you can get to that flow state. And we've seen it in all kinds of art, and I feel like it's really hard to tap into, and it is not natural for all of us to like. And I'm not saying that means everybody has to work at 5 a.m. I just mean,
oh, thank God.
You gotta find like your way to do deep work, and I think a lot of us, again, I don't mean to harp on social media, but there's such a large amount of maybe we'll call it filler content, like Tom was talking about, that that's not worthy of your time and not worthy of your attention. And yeah, I mean, building your brand can be a great thing, but I just feel like you should dive into the things that matter to you and just love them and try to make stuff you love. Because I've seen so many people go like, oh man, you can make a lot of money if you do X, Y, and Z. And they just don't end up with joy. And, I think, gotta really find that joy. And that's why, to me, again, my goal is to make music I love with people I love, with projects I love. And if you do that, you just really don't lose, So I think that would be my advice.
First of all, I love it. And second of all, I actually want to ask you a question that we talked about with Cliff last week. And that was sort of the maturity that an artist reaches when they're able to say, like, that's not perfect, but that's good enough, in the name of moving on, completing something. Because I think so many people get hung up on it's not perfect and they don't put it out there. And you can love something. I can love something and know in my heart it's not perfect, but still be proud as hell, right? That I did it and all of that. Where do you stand on that?
Oh, I think that's, especially in music, the warts are what people want, and I love rock and roll, that's kind of what I cut my teeth on. And I mean, Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin was a big influence on me, and those solos are not perfect. They are sloppy and they are awesome, and I just think that, yeah, it depends maybe on what type of art you're making and the time and place. But the imperfections are really what make it really special. But here's, I think, what's really important about them. You were talking about the maturity of somebody. I think a lot of it too is that level of expertise. When someone's put their 10,000 hours in, their little flub is really sometimes the lightning in the bottle moment of just like, oh, that was cool. That's different from like someone who's a little hesitant and maybe not confident. And that type of flub in music to me sounds not great. But when I'm hearing, a virtuoso, and it doesn't always have to be a virtuoso, but just somebody who's pouring it in, Hendrix was not the cleanest guitar player in the world, but it just freaking awesome. Rage Against the Machine is probably my favorite example of that. I love how raw that stuff is. And, we're in an era where you can make things really perfect easily. Not always easily, but yeah, let it be real, let it be human. And I'm a big fan of that. Now, then again, I do like some really tight pop and electronic music that is supposed to be like very robotic and on the beat and stuff. But I like humans a lot.
I watched the Tom Petty documentary on the plane this week. Have you guys seen that?
It's kind of a few years old, right?
I think so. I don't know. I hadn't seen it before, and I turned it on and literally texted someone and was like, I'm not really that big on Tom Petty, but I'm gonna like try this documentary or whatever. And like all music documentaries, I'm such a like sucker for a music documentary. But they were talking about the song Wildflowers and how he just kind of like came up with that like real quick and then spent all of this time adding these tiny little details to the song that were just sort of like fun little like that you can kind of find layers and layers and layers if you listen to it enough of all of these different interesting little things, which is fascinating because you hear that song in your head and you're like, that's just a little like tune, right? And then they played it and you're like, that's deep. But it reminded me of when you said like just a little flub kind of makes it. And I can just imagine him being like, here's a little thing I think is interesting. Throw it in there. Put that in there. Like Tom Petty's little kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it's like in visual art, like I imagine Michelangelo was like, just kind of making a little quickly, just like, whatever. And like, that's probably going to be pretty cool. Like,
yeah.
Versus somebody who has not quite that level of experience, doing that. So, yeah, I hope maybe you guys agree with that. But
totally.
I do. It's funny that when you mentioned Led Zeppelin, because when you said you like the warts in music, the first song I thought of was Out on the Tiles, and the Led Zeppelin song, and when it has the little stall, and it just has the guys say that like right at the end of a riff, and that's always stuck with me as like they're just recording it live as a whole band. This guy just said something and they just kept it in, and now it is totally part of the meter of that song for me. Like that's totally its own note whenever I hear that song now, and I love it because of that, so I totally agree with you on that, especially when it comes to music.
It's awesome. Yeah, like your podcast. Y'all are fun, man.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Eric.
I'm sorry that we A started late, and B like I feel like I could talk about all this stuff for so long. But it's
We'll have you back.
Yeah. Have you back?
Didn't even get into basketball. How about an entire episode devoted to yours and my basketball obsession?
nice. Like, are you talking NBA? We're talking college ball or just
Everything.
okay?
Playing, college, NBA, love it all. High school prospects. You want to talk high school prospects? Let's do it, baby. I'm all down. Yeah, there are Twitter accounts I follow for high school prospects and basketball. What of it? It's no big deal. But we'll save that for the next episode. I think for now, Derek, go blow out your candle, tuck in your sleeping bag in your tent. Make sure the flies don't burn you.
I don't know if we're still recording, but I do want to know how you guys met.
We met through Fish, the band.
Mhm.
I had known Jimmy for less than a year, I think. Like the band Fish first came back in 2009. I met Jimmy through some other friends. We started going to shows together. And then I was living in New York City at the time, and Fish was playing in South Carolina or North Carolina.
South,
yeah.
North,
I forget.
both. It was both, actually.
It was both, but I only went to one night.
Raleigh.
I went to Raleigh, so North Carolina, yeah. And I flew down for the concert to meet up with our buddy Dave Cups and Jimmy, and Blaine was there. I was like, hey, Blaine. And then
Here we are. But I think some of that time was really hard for me because they were all a group of people who knew each other and I was brand new. And, you know, the weird thing about me dating Jimmy is I never had met him before, obviously. But like I met him online and didn't know anything about him. And everyone I'd ever dated, I had some kind of background on or had known them in some other way. And I felt really alone a lot of those times. And also he was so fanatical about it. I was kind of like, normal? Like, this is wild. And so we would like oftentimes find ourselves after the show in like the corner of a bar and me being like, am I weird or is he weird or
one of us is on the spectrum and I don't know which one of us is. One of us is. I feel like I was welcoming to you.
Totally. Yeah, you were like a rock to me.
I was your rock. Yeah.
The guilt that Jimmy wasn't discussed in this, so please make sure he knows that
We love him.
Really love.
Yeah.
Jimmy's a rock solid dude. He's an all-American boy. He's just salt of the earth. Like
yeah,
if
he's doing dishes. If you hear a little something in the background, he's in there.
If you guys retired one day and Jimmy was just like up at dawn milking cows out in Montana, I would be like 100%.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's not going to do that because that requires some skill that I don't think he has. But if we retire and we move to like Jackson Hole and he's first tracks every morning, you know, I'd be like, tracks.
Yeah.
Tracks. Yeah. Just single-minded obsession with this.
Eric, were you at Blaine and Jimmy's wedding? Oh, is this a whole thing?
No, not a whole thing. Just a sadness.
Oh, okay, never mind then. Because I was gonna say maybe we crossed paths before, but I guess
just a lot of those when I was touring, and there's a really hard part about that, you know.
Yeah, the touring life. I'm taking drum lessons, and my drum instructor was a touring musician for like 10 years and he eventually gave it up and just has his private practice now where he, you know, teaches individual lessons to a bunch of people, mostly children. And then there's me. But he said he's just like, it's just too hard. It's just too hard of a life, especially I think these days compared to touring back in the 80s and even 90s. Just like the pay just isn't really there to make it viable. Like all the band members are just splitting a shitty house in like the projects because they're there 6 months out of the year, so they want to pay as little rent as possible, and then they're never home, so they can't have pets, they can't keep relationships, all this crap. So I do sympathize with that.
It is not that they're being greedy and saying like, oh, we need to make crazy amount. It's really a matter of like, hey, if I'm going to really make this work, I need to fly my wife out, or I need a home, or you know, when you have more resources like that, it can add up. So it's a tough game.
I mean, I don't think it's a greed thing. When you're doing a job, that requires you to travel for several months and you're working 5-6 days a week and you can't afford to pay rent, that's a problem. Like, I don't think that's a greed issue at all. I think that's a genuine concern that needs to be addressed.
Most of those people are really good at their job too. You know, that's the fun thing. Whereas like in so many other industries, if you're like decent at your job, you can pay your rent, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't require years and years of practice and tutors and musical study to, I don't know, full clothes at Kohl's. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Movie Brightly podcast. Thank you to Derek Mount, a wonderful guest, wonderful interviewee, and a little bit of an interviewer, I would say. Thank you to Cliff Bond, as always, now an alumnus of our podcast.
Alumnus Cliff Bond.
Alumnus Cliff Bond for the theme music. Thank you to our producer, Lincoln, for all the hard work you do behind the scenes. In the show notes, we will have links to Derek's music, all the different streaming platforms where his music lays. He's in many different projects. We will link to all of them, as well as all the social media crap that we normally put on there. And lastly, I would like to say, if you've listened to every episode so far, you have not rated, you have not left us a review, we are not friends anymore.
What are you doing? What are you doing? We asked for one thing.
This is episode 4. Like, we've given you 6 hours now.
Yeah,
of quality
of our time. Yeah,
that's like 3.
Taped you for 6 hours.
That's 2/3 of the Lord of the Rings trilogy that we just gave you for free.
Yeah,
and all that is a little click and a little thumbs up.
A little thumbs up, a smiley face, one character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a limit.
And then whatever the least amount of passing grade is.
You can even do like the bell with the red circle on the line through, like the no bell emoji.
Sure.
Give us 3 no bells.
Yeah,
Hey,
whatever.
no bells.
As we learned on the Kevin Gillespie episode, those things pay.
Yeah, they give you money, baby.
No.
First ever producing Nobel Prize, all 3 of them. So give us 3 Nobels, rate us 5 stars. Thank you so much to everyone, in all sincerity, who takes the time to listen to this podcast. It's very fun. Blaine and I have a great time. We hope you got something out of it, and we will see you all next week with a brand new guest, more fun chatting between Blaine and myself, and hopefully some major life updates that I don't want to spoil, but we'll talk about it next week. There's nothing. I'm just trying to get people to listen.